Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video on the channel. As you can see, I'm still in my makeshift setup. Microwave to my right, refrigerator to my left, but that does not stop us from our goal. And that is analyzing all the content league. And today's episode is about Manchester United, Carrick's boys, the Red Devils. Let's discuss. If you guys are new members of the channel, welcome. If you're returning members, welcome back. You guys are familiar with what goes on here. But for those of you who are new, if you enjoy the videos you're seeing, if you enjoy the content, like, comment, subscribe. That's the only way that this channel will continue to grow. That's the only way that this channel will continue to get better. So please, please, please support the channel. It's free. So Manchester United in this upcoming season, as we talked about with the other three teams, have a lot on the line. I think this is a huge opportunity for Manchester United to really consolidate themselves in the Champions League after qualifying last year under Michael Carrick. This is Michael Carrick's first full season after coming in halfway through the season after Ruben Amorim's debacle and calamitous time at the football club. I think in these past few years, you've seen Man United show glimpses of what they could be, whether that be under Erik ten Hag or Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, and they've shown sprinkles of magic and sprinkles of consistency. But in the long run, if you do want to make yourselves the Arsenals and the Liverpools and the Manchester Cities of the world, you really need to consolidate yourselves as a top four team. Even when the season goes really, really badly, you still have that floor as a top four team. And I think this is a season for Manchester United to really do that. Last year, of course, having as little games as they did, I think they had the minimum number of games you could have had as a team in the Premier League, getting knocked out of the FA Cup in the first round and getting knocked out, or at the first opportunity of getting knocked out, and getting knocked out of the Carabao Cup likewise against Grimsby Town in one of the worst defeats, I think, in Manchester United recent history, right? So coming into this season, with the increased number of games, with the increased pressure and the increased expectation, because I do believe last season the expectation surrounding Michael Carrick was simply just to steady the ship, similar to Roberto De Zerbi. There was no real expectation when it comes to how you played. There was no real expectation with the results. It was really just about consolidating the team, reestablishing the team as a team that's difficult to play against, make things fun again, reintegrate players who were kind of set aside back into the squad, the likes of Kobbie Mainoo, play players in their right position. I'm not trying to say that the job that he had was an easy job, but I will say that it's not a job that's similar to what is expected of him this season. And I think now being the full-time coach, of course, being announced as the full manager and the actual official manager of the football club, there's a whole new pressure that comes with that. Whether he'll be able to translate that form that we saw last season into this new season is going to be very, very interesting to see. I think with the increased number of games, specifically in the Champions League, where you're playing against elite teams pretty much every single game, right? Other than the 2 or 3 games you're going to play here and there against lower level ranked teams in the Champions League, you're going to be playing against teams that are probably the same level, if not better than you, every 2 to 3 days. Pair that with the Premier League games, and you'd be hoping farther runs in the Carabao as well as the FA Cup. Man United's squad is going to be stretched this season. This is a manager who doesn't have a lot of experience in terms of tactically and as a manager. Of course, he took over Manchester United briefly after, I believe it was Ralf Rangnick got sacked for about 3 games. I think everybody remembers those games where he was unbeaten against Chelsea. I think it was Arsenal, and I can't remember the third team, but he was unbeaten in those 3 games, and they looked pretty decent under him. Of course, he went to Middlesbrough and did what he did there. It wasn't the best job that he did there, and the ending was kind of sour for both parties, but he showed elements that he could be a somewhat successful manager. Of course, the job that he has now probably doesn't reflect the level of manager that he actually is. I think the fact that he played for Manchester United is more of a determinant as to why he has this job, but I think just that fact in itself, being a former player, allows you to have a certain experience and a certain understanding of the football club that perhaps a better manager who was not previously linked with the football club might have. And I think being a player in probably the club's most successful period under Sir Alex Ferguson allows you to transfer those experiences to these younger players. It allows you to transfer those experiences, the culture, the morale, the understanding of what this football club represents, what some of these fixtures represents to these players. And it's something that is pretty unique, right? And you'd hope that perhaps his tactical nous can level out and match up with that experience that he brings to the team, because Manchester United is definitely going to need it. As I mentioned before, this is a squad that has good players, right? I think Benjamin Sesko is a very, very good striker and a young striker who has a lot to learn, but he showed you last season within the limited minutes that he had, he's able to find the back of the net. Brian Mbeumo, likewise. We know what he's done at Brentford these past few seasons, and he's able to replicate that at Man United last season. Of course, he had moments of patchy form, but he still gives you about 10 to 15 goals in all competitions. Mateus Cunha, likewise. I don't think he's an out-and-out left winger, but he's able to do a job. And I think towards the second half of the last season, when Bryan Mbeumo's performances started to waver a little bit, you saw Mateus Cunha started to rise up. Amad Diallo, the understudy in a way to Bryan Mbeumo, a player who was really, really, really exciting under Ruben Amorim, one of the few bright sparks in that very dark time for this football club. He was not the best last season, and I think he himself would be able to admit that to you, but he showed at the World Cup that he still has a lot of quality, and they would be hoping, and Carrick as well as Man United, and he himself will be hoping that he'd be able to rediscover that this upcoming season. Of course, Marcus Rashford is coming back to the football club. He's another attacker that they'll be looking to hope for in terms of goals and registering assists and providing a bit of firepower in the attacking areas. And there are good players, as I said. Bruno Fernandes in the midfield, breaking the assist record last season and being the PFA player of the season. I think Senna Lammens is a top goalkeeper. Lisandro Martinez, coming back from injury at the World Cup, looked very solid, but of course got injured in the final again. So there are good pieces in this team. They have added on Yuri Tielemans as well as Andre Santos in a midfield that really needed a lot of rejuvenating, with Casemiro, leaving the football club after the expiring of his contract, and then Manuel Ugarte suffering a very, very, very serious injury at the World Cup that's pretty much sidelined him for the entire season. So even if Manchester United wanted to get rid of him, which I think they probably did want to, you can't really get rid of him. So midfield was definitely an area that they needed to prioritize even before both of those players were out of the equation. I think Man United really needed to address the midfield areas. Of course, Kobbie Mainoo exists in that position, but I think he's probably not the only midfielder you need in that area of the field. There's a lot of things that he's not really good at, and there's a lot of weaknesses he has in his game that you need another midfielder to make up for. Of course, he has a lot of strengths as well, but I look at covering spaces, and I think that's something in his game that he just doesn't have. And I think it's a consistent theme with the two players that Man United have signed, right? With Yuri Tielemans and Andre Santos. Yuri Tielemans is a player who I'm more familiar with. I think Yuri Tielemans is a top midfielder. He's experienced. He brings a lot of nous to the midfield for Man United. He's very, 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 very good on the ball. And he's the captain of the Belgian national team. This is a man who's played at Aston Villa for the last few seasons, Leicester before that. He was one of those young wonder kids that really looked like he was going to spark into one of the best players in the world. And of course, he hasn't turned out to be that, but he's still been able to salvage a very, very respectable career for himself. And I think this is a great signing for Man United. For the fee they got him for, this is a great midfield deputy to kind of just bring a sense of understanding into that midfield. Andre Santos, I also think, is a good midfielder, more of a box-to-box, can play in that 8 position. Showed glimpses at Chelsea, was incredible at Strasbourg, but at Chelsea never really got that opportunity. I mean, when you're playing behind a midfield double pivot of 2 players who cost a combined almost £250 million, it's going to be really difficult to get into that midfield. And of course, because of that, Santos has left the club. But I just don't feel like Man United have made enough signings based on the areas that they needed to address. The midfield, for example, I think Tielemans and Santos are good midfielders to go with. I think they're good midfielders to start with. But I still don't believe Man United have addressed the main issues they had in the midfield, being covering ground. I still don't think they've signed an actual number 6. Yuri Tielemans is a great player on the ball, but is very suspicious off of it. Andre Santos is probably better than him off the ball, but is still not this number 6 that's going to cover ground and cover really large spaces left by fullbacks or center backs or other midfielders. I think you needed a player like a Manu Kone or a player like a Chouameni or even a Camavinga or players of that ilk, right? Even the Baleba that they were linked to for a few months and few years now. Adam Wharton, likewise, right? Mateus Fernandes was a player they were linked with. He went to Tottenham. Sandro Tonali, Elliot Anderson. Man United didn't really get that huge blockbuster midfielder. And in my opinion, I think Man United needed to sign maybe even 3 midfielders in this transfer window. And to leave with only 2, one of them being Tielemans, who, yes, is good on the ball, but for me, he's very similar to Kobbie Mainoo in the sense of they're both good on the ball, but are not very, very good off of it. And then Andre Santos, who is kind of an unknown quantity in this league. Of course, there's talent there, but is he exactly what Man United needed? I'm not too sure. It feels more like a market opportunity for Man United because Chelsea didn't really need him anymore or didn't want him anymore. And Man United saw the price was good and they said, let's take a swing at it. Whether it's what they needed, I don't technically believe that. And even outside of the midfield, even if you do believe those 2 players are what Man United needed in those positions and you don't need a long gut-busting midfielder in the number 6 position to have a functional midfield behind Bruno Fernandes, I still don't think they've addressed the issues they have in the wide areas. As I said before, I don't believe Mateus Cunha is a left winger. the fact that Marcus Rashford is coming back to the football club for me is just not what anybody would have wanted in this situation. Of course, he wanted to come back to Barcelona, but Barcelona didn't want him, right? We didn't want him. So I felt like in that situation, Marcus Rashford surely should assess the situation and say, perhaps I need to lower my wage demands and look elsewhere. Because it's clear that Man United didn't want him. It's clear that he didn't want to go back to Man United. And now you just have two parties kind of just stuck with one another, even though neither of them wanted that situation at the end of the day. I feel like players like Joshua Zirkzee, how they're still at the club, I'm not really sure why. I look at their fullback positions. My goodness, Luke Shaw in 2026. Like, of course, he was able to rediscover that physical prime, if you want to say, kind of stayed away from injuries last season. But Luke Shaw is just not up to the level anymore. Really, he's not. He's not up to the level. And then your backup is what, Patrick Dorgu? And he looks like he's going to be kind of experimented as a wing player this season. So who's going to be the backup for Luke Shaw when he's unfit? You have Nusayr Mazraoui and Dalot on the right side, two fullbacks that I just don't think are good enough either. I think they're both bang average fullbacks. And Man United didn't look like they made any attempt to sign anybody to fill in those positions. Even in the center back positions, Man United have a lot of bodies, but I don't look at a lot of those players as dependable or even high quality. Harry Maguire, I don't think he's particularly still at that level anymore. Lisandro Martinez has shown that he's going to get injured every 2 to 3 months. Matthias de Ligt has been injured for about the last 7 months, and nobody knows particularly what he's injured with. I feel like other players even in the squad, Lenny Yoro is still young and is still figuring things out. I think Aiden Heaven is a very, very valuable asset and needs to be nurtured, but you need an elder statesman next to him in that center of the defense. So there's still a lot of areas in this team that I look at with Man United, and even in the striking position. Is Benjamin Sesko going to be trusted this season? Because we saw a lot of last season, he was coming off the bench. So is he going to be trusted this season to be that starting number 9? And if he isn't going to be the starting number 9, who is? Are they going to run a similar scheme of Mbeumo up top and Amad Diallo at the right wing? I'm not really moved, right? Bruno Fernandes last year did a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of creativity. Still haven't gone out and bought a replacement for him or bought a backup to him. And some people behind the screen will be screaming Mason Mount. I'm sorry, guys. Mason Mount in 2026 does not fill me with any sort of confidence whatsoever. So you haven't even gotten a player to kind of take the load off of Bruno Fernandes in terms of the creativity, because I don't look at Cunha or Mbeumo or Diallo as major creative outlets. Maybe Marcus Rashford is going to hit another level this season. I don't think so. I think just the media around him is just not good for him. The toxic environment is just not good for him. I think he just needed a new environment altogether, which is what he had at Barcelona. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he could find another form. Maybe he could find another spark. Maybe Carrick could get his arm around him and speak to him and get that Marcus Rashford that we knew and many people loved when he was at Man United before. Maybe all these things could happen. But I just look at the number of games Man United are going to be playing this season, the increased number of games, the increased strain on the squad, a squad that was already pretty razor thin last season, right? Even with the 40 games they were playing, look at the number of players that were out with injuries. Mazraoui was in and out of the treatment table, right? Maguire was injured for long periods. De Ligt was injured for a very, very, very long time. Lenny Yoro had moments that he was out of the team. Mason Mount was pretty much injured the whole season, right? Benjamin Sesko had some time out. Matheus Cunha as well. So you look at this squad and there's a lot of areas that don't have that depth that you need if you want to compete on all 4 fronts, which Man United will be hoping they can do. Perhaps they will kind of veer their concentration to some competitions ahead of others. That's natural. But I think for the most part, you'd expect that they're going to go all guns blazing for each competition. And I don't think they have the squad for it. Yes, they finished 3rd last season and it was a very good accomplishment and things look rosy. The football was good. Michael Carrick looked like one of the best managers in the world, and they had the most points since Michael Carrick came in, more than anyone else in the league, including Arsenal and Manchester City, who were the 2 main title contenders. But I don't look at this squad, and I don't look at Michael Carrick as a manager as you could definitely finish 3rd again with an increased number of games. With Chelsea, who don't have European football and have a better squad than Man United. With Tottenham, who probably have an equal quality and level of squad and don't have European football to contend with and have a better manager, right? Even the Liverpool. Now, Liverpool probably have an equal amount of strain on their squad, but I look at that Liverpool squad and there's a lot of players in that squad who I think are probably better than Manchester United squad. Maybe it's a bit closer than I'm making it out to seem. Yes, Liverpool have lost a lot of players, but they still have a Van Dijk, right? They still have an Alisson. They still have an Alexander Isak. These are players that if they do hit that form, I don't think there's many players in Man United squad that can even sniff that level, right? And then you got a coach like Anthony Raiola, who is just in a different stratosphere to Michael Carrick, or at least what we've seen from Michael Carrick so far. But again, as I said, just as it was with Tottenham, with Chelsea, with Liverpool, there is a huge, huge area of variance with this team. We could see a similar Man United that played last season, boisterous, exciting. The Stretford end behind them, singing songs. Bruno Fernandes stringing players in behind. Cunha celebrating with his surf. Mbuemo, clinical like he was at Brentford. Amad Diallo, electric in the wings. Šeško, clinical up top. Marcus Rashford, rediscovered on the wings. But we could also see a Marcus Rashford with his head down, doesn't want to be there. Michael Carrick, looking kind of lost in a bigger job with bigger expectation, with bigger pressure. A midfield of Tielemans, Santos, and Bruno run ragged. Kobbie Mainoo run ragged in the midfield with nobody there to really hold his hand. Fullbacks looking lackadaisical. Shaw picks up an injury. Lissandro out for a prolonged period of time. De Ligt likewise. Maguire likewise. Would you really be surprised if Man United start to falter when all these things start to happen? Because these situations are not situations that are out of the realms of possibility. Be interesting to see. Whether I have them ahead of the likes of Chelsea, Liverpool, and Tottenham, I'm not too sure. I certainly think Chelsea will have a better season than them just because they don't have European football to contend with. And I believe Chelsea have a better manager and a better squad. Liverpool is kind of neck and neck in my opinion. And Tottenham are probably the biggest variance in all these teams. Because if Roberto De Zerbi really finds a way to make it click, Tottenham could be exemplary. But if Roberto De Zerbi combusts, as I said in my video about Tottenham could have a terrible season. Tottenham could be horrible. So we'll have to wait and see. I'm not too high on Manchester United, but I'm definitely not too low on them. I think they could probably finish about, if I'm just doing a brief overview in my head, maybe 5th. Qualify again. I think that should be their goal for this season for Manchester United. If they're not going to make any more signings, which it doesn't look like they are, consolidate that Champions League, finish in that 5th position, continue that consistency in Europe's elite competition, reestablish yourself as a name that's consistently there. That allows you to entice more players, entice bigger names and better players to the squad, and continue to improve year on year. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Man United. But as always, let me know all your thoughts down in the comment section. Let me know what you think about the incomings for Man United. What do you make of Michael Carrick in his first full season? What do you think he's going to accomplish? And ultimately, what do you think Manchester United is going to look like going into this new season? Are they potential title outsiders, or are they just a team that is going to be striving for Champions League and Europa League qualification? Let me know all that and a whole lot more down in the comment section. Thank you guys always so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one, which will be Manchester City, which for me are probably the biggest contenders to Arsenal's crown. I'll get that to you guys as soon as I can, probably after the Community Shield. Will I make a video about that? Probably not. Enjoy the game. Thank you guys so much for watching. Take care of yourselves and goodbye.